Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over a major severe weather event over parts of the Tennessee Valley and then up through parts of the Ohio Valley and the Northeast, and then by tomorrow we'll be dealing with mostly parts of the Mid-Atlantic and the Southeast, dealing with some severe weather. We have our second high risk of the year within just about a week of each other, so I believe that's one of the closest proximities of two high risks that we've seen either for the past few years at least. Maybe even going back to when they first introduced the high risk into their forecast. So definitely we're really ramping up with the severe weather season. We're only in late March, so we have a lot more severe weather to go through until the severe weather season is over. And let's get right into it. So here's what the current National Weather Service page looks like, and it is actually quite active today. We'll start off in the west. We have some winter weather advisories scattered over Alaska, as well as for some areas scattered through parts of the Rockies. That's in the purple. We have some winter weather, or some wind advisories actually, in that brown shaded area for parts of the Southwest, and that kind of golden color there. That's what that's where we have some blowing dust advisories. We have more wind advisories in the light brown scattered throughout parts of the eastern United States. We have high wind warnings in effect in that kind of golden color right here, and that's what we're dealing with the highest threat of wind damage. And then we have high wind watches in the darker brown for parts of the Ohio Valley and parts of the areas surrounding Lake Erie. We also have more flood watches up for areas surrounding Tennessee, mainly from the severe weather. We have one batch up through here and another batch that's just starting back down through here. We have red flag warnings also in effect for southern Texas, and actually some flood watches all the way up in northern New York and northern Vermont as well. Yesterday, we had a high temperature in Nevada, Texas, where they got to 98 degrees Fahrenheit. In Peterson's, Utah, we had the national low temperature for the lower 48. They got to negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit. And the highest precipitation report was in Galliano, Louisiana, where they got 9.96 inches of rainfall. There were many reports in this area around Mississippi, southeastern Louisiana, and that general area that got over 7 inches of rainfall. And the highest snowfall report was 4 miles west of Red Lodge, Montana, where they got 24 inches of reported snowfall that fell yesterday. Here's what the current radar looks like, because it is really firing up already. So you can see that batch that I was talking about further to the south. This is the one that the Storm Prediction Center is actually watching more closely than all of this that's going up through here, because this batch, this one further to the south down here, is what has a greater risk of becoming extra severe. So you already saw a fairly potent severe outbreak, which would at least constitute a moderate risk if this was just on its own. But now we're going to be dealing with another more severe, more prime wave of severe weather that's going to be going through parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and into Tennessee as well, right through that area. And then you can see that we have two general areas of low pressure. We have one general area of low pressure right through here, and another smaller low pressure right down here. So both of these is where we have a low pressure in place. If we look at some of the mesoscale discussions that are currently in place, here's mesoscale discussion number 252, and they're talking about some early storms from Mississippi into Alabama may become tornadic over the next few hours, and that's mainly from what's happening down here. They're hinting that we could see more of those storms head further to the north. If we look at mesoscale discussion number 253, you can see that they're talking about potentially initiating some sort of watch right around 2 p.m. And they're expecting some very strong storms to move through these areas around 2 p.m. Central Time today. So 2 to 3 p.m. is when they're really eyeballing for potentially seeing some decent severe weather. And then you can see that area where we have that's our warm sector right here in this kind of dark red area, and that's where they're hinting at the most prime area for severe weather to take place. And if we look at mesoscale discussion at number 254, which is the last one that they've issued, we have some developing thunderstorms that may pose a severe risk over the coming hours. Conditions will be monitored, and that's from that wave of severe weather that I just talked about just about a minute ago, and they're highlighting how much energy is over some of these areas. We have over 2,500 CAPE in some of these areas, so really perfect conditions for some severe weather to spawn up. Here's what the Storm Prediction Center has on their day one outlook, and currently it is quite loaded in terms of their page. We have a general thunderstorm risk in the light green. In the dark green, we have a marginal, slight risk in the yellow, enhanced risk is in that orange, and we have a moderate risk in the red. And that enhanced and moderate risk, they don't put out too often, and they rarely put out a high risk. And again, besides the one that we had last week, was the first high risk that they put out since 2019. Of May of 2019. So they rarely put these out. They usually wait about a year or two in between each time that they put out a new high risk, because a high risk really denotes a very prime and very organized area of storms that's going to be rolling through that has a large potential to cause some damage. And the fact that this has happened twice in just about 7 days is quite astonishing, and it's definitely one of the first times that we've seen two high risks so close to each other. Here's what the tornado risk looks like, and this is going to be really a big threat, and again, mainly from that batch that's down here. This batch that was up here was mainly non-tornadic. I believe we only had one or two tornado watches that actually went up, or tornado warnings that actually went up through that area, but it's going to be this one that goes all the way up from Louisiana and Mississippi and has an entire few hours rolling through extremely good conditions for severe weather. That's going to be the one that we want to watch out for. They have a 30% chance of any area within 25 miles. If you were to, for example, if I were to pick this point within here, there's within a 25-mile radius, a 30% chance that anywhere within there will actually see a tornado. So when you actually add that up, they're talking about maybe some areas seeing and generally in general throughout this severe weather outbreak, maybe 10 to 20 tornadoes, if what they're talking about is actually correct. And if we look at tomorrow, we have a bunch of different areas that we have general and marginal risk, not as severe as today, definitely. So we have one up in the northeast, we have another one down through parts of the southeast, we have another one through the Tennessee Valley, and one more back through into parts of the Central Plains as well. And if we look at the day 3 outlook, this would be for Saturday, and we're looking at a slight risk of severe weather. On day 3, that's actually fairly significant. You want to really watch out. I wouldn't be surprised if they put an enhanced or even moderate risk on this one, because just from model guidance, it does look quite severe. We have a slight risk of severe weather in place for those areas. And if we look at the day 4 outlook, they actually have a 15% chance equivalent to a slight risk of severe weather, and that would be for Sunday. Here's what the Weather Prediction Center is showing for the chance of flooding, and we have in that yellow a 10 to 20% chance of slight risk, and then we have a 20 to 50% chance in the red of seeing seeing flash flooding in those areas. So definitely watch out if you live anywhere within that risk zone for flash flooding. So let's start timing this out for you guys, and we're going to zoom in on the Tennessee and Ohio valleys because that's where the most severe weather is really going to be taking place. So this would be by right around 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central Time, and we're looking at more of that severe weather ramping up through parts of the lower Tennessee Valley. So you go into northern Mississippi, northern Alabama. That's where you're really dealing with that severe weather. And by the way, just to break down what's happening, we have your general area of low pressure right through here, kind of expanded like that. We have cold, dry air that's coming in from the north, and that's wrapping in on the western and even parts of the southwestern side of the storm. And then because of that, we're actually getting a lot of warm air, which is getting wrapped up into the northern and eastern side of the system. So right in between there is where we're going to be dealing with, and where they clash is where we're going to be dealing with severe weather. And you can see that that area happens to be right through here, and that's where we're dealing with the highest risk of severe weather. This is going to be by tonight, and we're dealing with more thunderstorms really getting severe by this point. We want to watch out for tornadoes, because this type of storm activity is what really spawns tornadoes, when you have these tiny individual dots of heavy rainfall. That's called a supercell, and those are what are notorious for spawning tornadoes, and you really want to watch out for that. We could have some potentially EF2 or greater tornadoes through those areas. So really watch out if you live within the Tennessee Valley, and especially if you live south of Tennessee as well. That's where you're going to have the highest risks of severe weather. Going through tonight into early tomorrow morning, the low pressure heads up through parts of Ohio and Indiana. It's heading to the north and to the east. Watch out if you live in the northern half of Michigan, maybe a little bit of a switch over to snowfall as well, and you're going to see that play out. But the rest of the areas are going to be dealing with mostly just thunderstorm activity. You get into the northeast in the Ohio Valley, it's going to be more moderate to heavy rainfall, but not really too much in the way of tornadoes or hail at all. So it's going to be mostly just thunder, lightning, heavy rain at times, and definitely nothing like what we're seeing down in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee potentially, and also a little bit of Georgia as well. If we go through Friday morning, we still have that low pressure heading up through Ohio, and then we can see that that's going to continue to move further to the north and east. If we shift over to the picture to the northeast, you can see some of that switch over to snow over parts of northern Michigan, but the main story is back through the northeast where we have scattered rainfall. That system continues to head further to the north and to the east, and mainly the only areas getting rainfall by this point are in the interior northeast. You can see a line of storms moving through northern Vermont. Many of the models have been indicating at something like that occurring, and then by Friday night it's pretty much all said and done with, except if you live in northern New York, parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and northern Maine as well. Here's what the CAPE numbers look like, the convective available potential energy, and you can see that we have a lot of CAPE and a lot of energy left over in the atmosphere. 1 to 3,000 CAPE back throughout this area. You only really need 500 CAPE to spawn up a decent thunderstorm, so when you're dealing with 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, maybe even over 2,500 CAPE, you have enough energy to spawn up a thunderstorm. This would be by later today. Moving into early tomorrow morning, so 1, 2, 3 a.m., and we're looking at that storm system up through Indiana and Ohio, bringing down some more, a lot of energy back up to the north, through parts of Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and then kind of going back down through the southeast. And then you're going to see that, again, all shift further to the east, and on the back side of this, you get more of that warm air, moist air to be wrapped up in the system. Your low pressure is right here by this point, and that's why areas in Vermont and upstate New York might be dealing with a little bit of severe weather and heavy thunderstorm activity, mainly because you're getting so much warm air to be wrapped up into the system. And on the opposite end, we're actually dealing with a lot of cold air that's being wrapped in on the southern end of the system as well. So it's a very dynamic system in general. Here's what the rainfall totals look like, and we're looking at mainly in the reds 2 to 4 inches of snowfall. So you can see that bullseye in northern Alabama, southern Tennessee, northern Georgia, and northern Mississippi. If you're in the yellows, you're 1 to 2 inches. In the blue, half an inch to an inch, and a tenth of an inch to half an inch. In the greens, if you're in the grays, that's where you're under a tenth of an inch of expected liquid precipitation. And here's what the maximum wind gusts look like as well. So you can see in miles per hour, we're dealing with this entire area over 35 miles per hour at least. And then you really go through parts of the Ohio Valley, and that's where we're dealing with gusts that are closer to 60 miles per hour, even upwards of 70 miles per hour or more in some of these isolated areas. So you really want to watch out, tie down any loose furniture that may be outside of your house. Try and bring that inside if you can, because it might blow away with all these gusty winds. And that's why we have those high wind warnings, high wind watches, and wind advisories posted all through the eastern United States due to the system. Another thing that I think is very, very important to look at, while I was looking at when I make these videos, usually I look at the models before, of course, I make these videos, and I kind of analyze them, and then I choose what I'm going to put in the video. And this is something that really caught my eye, is the level of wind direction change with height. So this is what these surface winds look like, and I'm going to draw the direction that they're coming out of in black. So we have the winds mainly coming out of the south, somewhat like this. If we switch to just a slightly elevated level, so this is only 2 to 3,000 feet up in the atmosphere, and I'll draw this one in dark red, I guess, and we're looking at winds coming somewhat like this out of Louisiana and Mississippi, and then crossing over like this. So you can already see the change in wind direction. If we go just a little bit higher up in the atmosphere, you can see that it's quite changed by this point, and I'll draw this one in yellow. And actually I'll do it in blue, and you can see that we have the winds coming somewhat like this. So we definitely have change with height over this area, generally over Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee, and that's what's going to really help tornadoes, because when you have spin in the atmosphere, you already have half the component of a tornado. So you have those thunderstorms, you have it spinning around in the atmosphere, it's able to bring that cool, drier air that rises, and that's how you get a thunderstorm. You get that actually you get the warm air to rise, it becomes cooler, drier air, and then because of that, it expels all that moisture, and that's how you get a thunderstorm to develop. So because of that, because of all the spin, we're going to be able to get a much larger thunderstorm, and a lot greater of potential of hail, especially as you get the hail to kind of spin around in the upper parts of the atmosphere and then eventually drop down to the surface. You can get the hail size to actually increase quite a bit. So that's something that you really want to pay attention to, because it will cause a large difference. Here's the high temperatures as well, because we definitely have enough warm air in place. So here's for today. And we have high temperatures that are going to be in the 70s along parts of the East Coast, back through the Tennessee Valley and into the southeastern United States as well. So really above normal over these areas, and also definitely ample to support some severe weather. And then you go into tomorrow, much nicer, especially if you live right along the immediate coast, because if you look at this right here from Florida all the way up to upstate New York, we're dealing with temperatures that are going to be in the 70s and even 80s as you get a little bit further to the south, and that's what's going to really help fuel the thunderstorms over the northeast for tomorrow, as well as some of those thunderstorms that are going to be moving through parts of the southeast tomorrow. And if we look at some of the dew points, you'll see that they are also quite good for storm development, especially over this area. But I've been saying this all week, I'm not too impressed with the dew points as you get further to the north, and that's why I don't think we're dealing with a huge storm threat over those areas. So you can see 60 degrees basically my dew point benchmark if you're above that, then you can typically see a fairly good thunderstorm. If you're below that, typically you're not going to see as good of a thunderstorm, and you can see that many of the areas throughout the Tennessee Valley and the southeastern United States, they're all above 60-degree dew points. That shifts over to areas east of the Appalachians, all the way up to about central Pennsylvania and New Jersey, but you get north of there and you're below that 60-degree benchmark. You can still get thunderstorms with that, but it's definitely not going to be anything of significance or magnitude. And if you were to move that forward a little bit, you would see that we would have more of that cold, dry air quickly press in, and I think that's another thing that's gonna really not really help these thunderstorms developing and becoming stronger. It's gonna have to move very quickly, because you're gonna have a lot of cold air quickly going in through on the western edge of this, so it's gonna have to really move fast. So this is gonna wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.